Alright, hello everybody, Interjection here, and I wanted to do a follow-up video to my suggested balance changes where I replied to some of the comments that were left. 28 on the YouTube video, that's actually quite a lot for one of my Chronicle videos, and then a few more, much longer comments on the Reddit as well, so that's really nice to see. Definitely people interested in this topic, something that's definitely good to talk about, but that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be me replying to the comments. It is not this gold video that I was going on about, and it is certainly not any of these other videos that I'm going to make either. It's just me making another video about the first video where I just replied to comments, because I think, there was quite a lot of discussion. A lot of it I really liked, a lot of it I didn't necessarily agree with, and I wanted to use this video to reply to all of that in full, in a succinct way to everyone all at once. I think that's the best way to reply. So, that's what we're going to do. If Ogre Warlord is to be nerfed, so should Raptor's ridiculous armor gain cards like Ice Nile and Corp Beast. I totally agree on Ice Nile, that card is way too strong. Corp Beast, I think, on the other hand, is something that is not as ridiculous as Ice Nile. This you put almost no effort into and you just get a bunch of armor. Whereas Corp Beast, you do have to have that interesting condition of having lots of life. And currently, I think, that condition is very easy for Raptor to fulfill, in the sense that, he's got anticipations, rock crabs, and lots of ways, Cullies, to gain health. So having high life total is never really very difficult. So because of that, Corp Beast just goes into every deck. I don't really think it should go into every deck, but right now it can, because life is not very hard to come by. And I think that's just the big problem with Raptor currently, that he has too much life gain. He's the tank, right? He's all about armor, and I think that should really be his theme. It is his theme, but I think alongside that, he just has too much health gain, and that makes it all of his armor gain cards much stronger. There was another comment, I believe, on the YouTube video saying that, Armor Raptor will be way too strong if you get rid of stuff that destroys armor. And that's potentially true right now, but that's just because, they can tank their life down super fast with Void Brawlers and Fight Cauldrons and be really low life, and that's okay, because you just heal back up again. I think the only card that should really give you the potential to do that is something like Sara Brew. Imagine if that was Raptor's only class card that gave him any kind of life. That would be so good, because then you could just, if you were playing an aggro deck, you'd, smack away at their armor all game long. If you were playing a mid-range deck, you'd smash their armor away, and then Sara Brew's never going to be particularly effective, because they can't build up enough armor, and I feel like that's the way it should be. I mean, if you don't do anything, and you let Raptor do his thing, then, yeah, Sara Brew's going to be really good. I think that's a very interactive and fun world to live in. But right now, Sara Brew's not really very good, because you can just run Anticipations and Rock Crabs, and because of that, AP Sustain winning the final fight Raptor is just going to be the go-to Raptor, because, you can run those cards, they're really good, and alongside that you can run Corp Beast. There's no reason to play any other kind of Raptor. The problem is Corp Beast just goes into that deck, and you don't have to build a deck around Corp Beast. I feel like if you want to run Corp Beast, you're going to have to find ways to get your life back up. Maybe it's the Sara Brew deck that I mentioned, or maybe you do end up spending all the gold on Romleys and Garayo Horde Stalkers and stuff like that. But right now, you don't have to build a deck around Corp Beast, and that's why it's strong. Alright, next up, we do have, TD is just an incredibly fun card to use, which does count for something. And I agree, right? Slamming Double Jad on Chapter 1 and going up to 5 base attack, that's always going to feel great, because it's just insanely powerful, it's going to help you win, you get the advantage, and people just like winning. That's just games generally, and cards that help you do that are always going to feel great. I think the problem is that in Chronicle there just are a large number of cards that just don't make me feel fun or great to play with at all. It's particularly cards that cost gold. You even say it here. Gold-based AP decks are heavily underwhelming, especially when you compare something like Amulet of Fury to literally anything. Yeah, Amulet of Fury just... Well, actually, that card in particular is interesting. I think it's nearly there. I think Raptor is one of the few classes that does have, enough tools to kind of play a gold-based gain AP deck. All the other classes just don't. But, yeah, it's just, at the moment, it's just still not good enough, because TD is so good, right? Can we share some of the fun? Can we make some of the, cards that cost gold feel a bit more fun? Because right now I just don't play them in my deck because they don't feel fun. Well, because they're not good, and that doesn't feel fun, right? So there is that. And then you go on to say... well, actually, TD is incredibly easy to punish with bar fights or other weapon grief, and yeah, sometimes you're going to hit the TD weapon, and then they'll face tank a Jad or a Sentinel and die, but, lots of other people, that is, have pointed this out. They say, oh, TD's fine, you can destroy the weapon. Okay, you can sometimes do that, but actually, let's just remember that the weapon removal destroys every weapon, not just TD weapons. Like, people don't look at D-Long and go, oh, I can run D-Long because it's not destroyed by weapon removal. It doesn't change the fact that TD is batshit broken. Like, there's no other card that does what TD's doing still. And I think to a large extent is why people run so much weapon removal. I actually don't think weapon removal is necessarily the best use of a deck slot, at least lots of it. And the fact that it's so popular is a testament to why TD is so strong. Like, TD is the problem here, not the fact that you can remove the weapon doesn't matter. Like, that affects every weapon, not just the TD weapon. To put it in perspective, let's take Garayo Hordestalker. That seems like it ought to be a good card, right? Gives you a 5 attack weapon and you have 2 base attack. You're now on 7 total attack. You can kill a Jad. Maybe you 2-hit kill a Commander Ziliana. I see that going in a gold deck. Or maybe you 2-hit kill Ukla Gore or something like that, right? Like, that seems like it ought to be a good card, but it's not, because it doesn't give you a base attack as well. If it did, then alright, but it doesn't. TD is really, really strong. Alright, next up we do have Forgiven12, who says, for me, the main objective of balancing should be to make as many different playstyles viable as possible, and to keep the metagame from becoming too one-sided. And I 100% agree with that statement, and then he goes on to talk about some stuff that I basically agree with. Later, he does say, yes, Virago is very strong, but it does have counterplay, because if you're going second, you can play weapon removal and destroy their weapon. And if you're going first, then you can play something with Exhaust written on it, and you get to strike them if it's something like Tokash or Black Knight Titan, which gives you a bit of extra damage in the final fight, but also you go down to 1 base attack, and then your opponent only equips a 4/3 weapon, right? And yes, those are the counters to it, and in top-level play, stuff like Black Knight Titan and Tokash does see play in decks specifically to counter Virago, but also because they're reasonable cards for dealing damage as well. Okay, yeah, as counterplay, but this still comes down to the fact that the game is basically decided by the final cards that you play, right? As opposed to all of the other cards you play for the rest of the game. Like, my main argument about Virago in the video was that I found it frustrating that basically all game, the cards you're playing, the order you're doing things in, the small advantages you're getting, they don't really matter very much, and that ultimately games are being decided by the final slot of each player, not all of the cards and all of the things that they are doing the whole game. So ultimately, I think my argument that the supposedly OP card Virago is definitely still supposedly OP. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think enabling counterplay, like just generally as a thing, is important in all games, especially Chronicle. And I'm not really an advocate for outright deleting the card, right? I do want it to be changed to something, but I don't know what that would be. The reason I said delete the card was just for emphasis, really. I was just stating a fact that this is really not healthy for the game. Yes, I want it to be changed to something, but I don't know what that would be. What I do know is that I want it to have absolutely nothing to do with a weapon, and that's it. Alright, next up is Goth Girl Games, who basically says a whole bunch of things that I agree with, except for perhaps Scarface Pete and Ogre Warlord. Scarface Pete, she says, perhaps only ought to discard support cards, and then it would basically become, you know, just a pure tech card that would only really see play in an Ariane heavy meta. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because, you know, if it did only discard support cards, it's certainly not going to be as strong. It kind of makes me think of Hearthstone in the sense that the devs there, they only make cards that are fun. That's a big part of their design philosophy. They evaluate all cards in a kind of fun way. Is this card fun? If not, let's not make it. I don't really think Scarface Pete would make the cut in Hearthstone, and forgive me if this has changed, but I don't think there is any cards in Hearthstone that discard your opponent's cards. I mean, certainly there are ones that make you discard your cards, but not like your rival discards 3 cards, because that's not fun. I don't know, like, I don't know how I feel about that in Chronicle, because I quite like playing Scarface Pete. That makes me feel good, but I understand that your opponent is not going to feel too happy about that. At the same time, though, if it only discarded supports, it's going to be a lot worse. I think overall, certainly sometimes it'll be better against particular decks where you want to hit key cards like Amulet of Fury and maybe other cards that grant base attack. Those decks don't exist just yet, but maybe that wouldn't be too good again. I think it targets to specifically one thing, come to think of it now. Yeah, I don't think it would be very good to have, because in the future I hope gold decks will be a thing, and I can see this Scarface Pete being super strong against them. and not punishing at all to AP-based decks. Yeah, I think it should be stay the way it is, but increase its stat line. I'm going to stick with what I said. Definitely interesting to think about, and I kind of find it funny how I came to that conclusion just from reading and talking about it. But Ogre Warlord, I do have some predefined thoughts about. I won't just ramble for this one. Her first change, she says, perhaps it ought to give you a 2/3 weapon, something like that, instead of 1 base attack. And I can see that. If you're going to keep the armor destruction part of the card, then yeah, it needs toning down. I think it giving you a weapon instead of base attack definitely does that, but I would quite like to see the armor effect removed. I think that's the more problematic card, and she says that she thinks that is as well. I agree the effect on armor is the problematic half of the card. But she would like it to remain a tech card, right, that would still see play. I don't know how I feel about that, because there are other cards like Green Dragon in the collection that effectively do what Ogre Warlord would do. I guess the point I'm making is that I don't think we need 2 cards that do that, Ogre Warlord and Green Dragon, and obviously even Raging Calphite for Linza. Personally, I would change all of them, and I do have some interesting ideas for those. They would still be armor tech cards, but they wouldn't be as... I think I said ungraceful and lumbersome in the previous video. Those are words I used to describe it. But yeah, here I think Green Dragon should be the armor removal card if it's going to stay exactly the way it is. I think Green Dragon is the card to do that. And Ogre Warlord should be changed to do something else because it does too many things. These are all things I've said before. But I guess Gothgirl's saying that she would like Ogre Warlord to remain the armor destruction card. I don't know if that necessarily means Green Dragon should do something different. But yeah, I personally don't think there's point in having 2 cards that do effectively the same thing. Yeah. Alright, next up we have Stoof, who basically says, this is how you compare support cards to creature cards. This is how you compare the gold cost of something to the stat line of a creature. And I thought it was really interesting. He starts out with a 0-cost support that says rival discards 1 card would be sort of fair. And I agree, that would be completely fair. It wouldn't be a very good card, given that it's not particularly slot efficient. You're just not really doing very much in one of the 20 slots that you have in the game. But if you add a gold cost to this card, say 3 gold or 2 gold, something like that, you can now basically double the effectiveness of the card. That's what other cards do. Cabbage is a 0-cost support that heals you for 4, and Romley Weaklax basically costs 3 gold. It is 2 gold, it's slightly less, but, you know, same thing, right? It has a gold cost on it now that is within this sort of region, this sort of pricing area, and now the effect is basically doubled. Instead of healing you for 4, it now heals you for 7. And maybe if Romley did cost 3 gold, it would heal you for more than 7. Maybe 8 or 9, I don't know. But Ghost Ship, right? If you add 3 gold cost to this 0-cost support that he mentioned, you basically have Ghost Ship, right? You have a card that costs 3 gold and discards 2 cards. And I just want to take this moment to point out that I actually do think that Ghost Ship should cost 2, like Romley Weaklax. But that's not the point, right? But if you add more to the gold cost of Ghost Ship, let's now make it, I don't know, a 6-cost support, you could then get it to discard 3 cards. I don't necessarily know if 6 is the right number, but the point we're getting to is... He goes on to talk about Dagannoth Sentinel, right? That is a creature that rewards 1 base attack and gives you 2 life as a reward. So, how much does that cost? And I think the answer is, well, it's around the same value as Nastroth, which is a 4-cost support that gives you 1 base attack. Nastroth does not give you 2 life, so I guess you kind of have to add that onto the Dagannoth Sentinel if that were a support, you know, the 2 life. Maybe it should cost, like, 4.5 gold, you know, 4.5 gold, which rounds up to 5. So Dagannoth Sentinel as a support would just be a really bad 5-cost support, because it has to round up. But, you know, if it was a 4-cost support, it would be strictly better than Nastroth. Basically, it's around 4 gold if you converted it into a creature, into a support. So the question we're getting to is, where would Scarface Pete be here? If Dagannoth Sentinel costs 4 gold, then Scarface Pete... I think that's a much better card than Dagannoth Sentinel. So basically, I think what we're saying is, through this line of reasoning, where we're comparing creatures to supports, Scarface Pete is too good, and the stat line ought to probably be increased to 8-9, and that would seem about fair. Not necessarily 8-9, it could be, I don't know, I haven't play tested it, maybe 6-9, somebody suggested earlier, but certainly bigger than it is now. That's the point we're making, right? It then goes on to talk about Tormented Demon. And something I didn't consider was just increasing the size of the creature. I think all of this is very interesting, but the point I want to hit home is that, you know, TD is a 4/10, right? A 4/10 that rewards 1 base attack. Isn't that almost just, like, strictly better than Dagannoth Sentinel? Like, if you take your Sergeant Slimetoe's weapon and then kill a Tormented Demon, you take 4 damage from the creature, and then 4 damage because of the card text. That's 8 damage. Isn't that just the same as a Daganov Sentinel? I mean, I guess Dag does heal you for 2, so it's kind of like only taking 6 damage. But then you get a 4-2 weapon as well as 1 base attack. Isn't Tormented Demon just a bit too strong here? And then he goes on to talk about maybe we should increase the stat line. I don't necessarily think these are bad suggestions. Make it a 5-12 or even an 8-9 or an 8-10, sorry, just like Daganov Sentinel. I think that would be another way that Tormented Demon could be nerfed if you were going to make it keep the same effect that it has currently. But I do not think that that is the best route to go down. I think Tormented Demon, no matter what stats you give it, it's still just going to be a very strong early game card. And I think that's the problem, right? I think the potential needs to be nerfed, not the size of the creature. But, yeah, that concludes all the comments that I was going to reply to. Thank you very much. There were a whole bunch more on the YouTube, and I was going to reply to them as well, but when I looked at them, I realized I've actually just covered all of those comments just from the ones I've talked about on Reddit. I think, you know, a lot of the same things are being said, so if there is anything you'd like me to reply to, then, I mean, maybe I can do a reply video to the reply video. But yeah, leave some more comments, and that'll be interesting. I do like having a discussion about these kind of things, but probably the next video will be the gold video. So, until then, goodbye.